The Arizona desert had a way of making people feel small. For Clara Whitmore, the endless stretch of golden sand, rocky mountains, and empty skies had been both her home and her prison. Every morning, she woke before the sun climbed over the hills, carried water from the well, tended the small garden behind her cabin, and reminded herself that she was stronger than the loneliness that surrounded her. At 20 years old, Clara had lived a life far different from the one she once imagined. She had grown up believing the world was simple. Good people were rewarded, bad people were punished, and every woman eventually found a safe home with a loving husband. But the frontier had a way of destroying childhood dreams. After losing her parents to illness, Clara was left with nothing but a small piece of land and the memories of the family she had lost. The nearby settlement offered little comfort. People were polite, but they were also quick to judge. They whispered that a young woman living alone in the wilderness was foolish. They warned her about outlaws, wild animals, and most of all, the Apache warriors who traveled through the desert. "Never trust a man who comes from the canyonlands," the town elders told her. "They are dangerous." Clara listened, but deep inside she wondered if fear had made people blind. She had learned that not everyone who looked frightening was cruel, and not everyone who smiled was kind. Still, she never expected the stranger who would arrive at her doorstep on a cold desert night. The storm came suddenly. Dark clouds covered the sky, and the wind screamed through the valley. Clara rushed outside to secure the animals and close the wooden shutters before the rain turned the dusty ground into mud. That was when she heard it, a sound beyond the fence. At first, she thought it was a wild animal. Her heart raced as she grabbed the old rifle her father had left behind. Then she saw him. A man stood near the edge of her property, barely able to remain standing. His clothing was torn. His shoulder was covered in blood, and his face showed the exhaustion of someone who had been fighting for survival. Clara froze. She recognized him immediately. The dark hair, the strong features, the traditional clothing. An Apache. Every warning she had ever heard returned to her mind. Run, hide, protect yourself. But then she saw his eyes. There was no anger there, no threat, only pain. The stranger collapsed before he could say anything. For a moment, Clara stood frozen, staring at the wounded warrior lying in the dirt. She knew what people in town would say if they discovered what she had done. They would call her reckless. They would say she had brought danger into her home. But leaving an injured man to die was something Clara could not do, not even if the world told her he was her enemy. She dragged him inside with great difficulty and placed him near the fireplace. The man was heavier than she expected, and every movement reminded her that she was bringing a powerful warrior into the one place where she was supposed to feel safe. She cleaned his wound carefully and waited. Hours passed. The stranger remained unconscious. During that time, Clara noticed things that surprised her. He carried no stolen goods, no signs of cruelty, no evidence of the monster people described. Instead, she found small reminders that he was simply a man. A small carved wooden charm, a worn piece of cloth, carefully folded, a faded symbol that seemed to carry deep meaning. Who was he? And why did someone like him look so broken? When the stranger finally opened his eyes, Clara stepped back instinctively. His gaze moved around the small cabin before stopping on her. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then, in a quiet voice, he asked, "Why did you help me?" Clara hesitated. Because she was afraid. Because every person she knew would tell her she had made a mistake. Because something about him made her believe there was more to his story. Finally, she answered, "Because you were hurt." The warrior studied her as if those simple words confused him. "My name is Talon," he finally said. Clara nodded slowly. She wanted to ask where he came from. She wanted to ask why he was injured. She wanted to ask why a feared Apache warrior was standing inside her home instead of fighting against those who hated him. But something stopped her. She saw the loneliness in his expression. It was the same loneliness she felt every night when the desert became silent. For the first time in many years, Clara realized she was not the only person carrying invisible wounds. Over the next few days, Talon recovered inside her cabin. He spoke little, but his actions revealed more than his words. He helped repair broken fences, carried heavy supplies, and protected her home without asking for anything in return. The man everyone feared was patient. The warrior everyone called dangerous was gentle. And the more Clara learned about him, the more she realized that the greatest mysteries were not found in the desert. They were hidden inside people. But Talon still kept a secret that had followed him for years, a secret that made him believe he could never belong anywhere. And when Clara eventually discovered the truth behind the Apache warrior's silence, her entire understanding of love, trust, and destiny would change forever. For the first time in years, Clara Whitmore no longer felt completely alone. The presence of Talon had changed the quiet rhythm of her life. Before he arrived, her cabin had been filled only with the sounds of the wind, the creaking of old wood, and her own thoughts. Now there was another heartbeat in the room, another person sharing the silence. Yet even as Talon healed, Clara noticed something unusual about him. He was always watching, not in a threatening way. It was as if he expected danger to appear at any moment. Every sudden sound made him turn toward the door. Every distant horse seemed to put him on alert. At night, Clara sometimes woke and saw him sitting outside near the fire, staring into the darkness as if he was fighting battles that existed only in his memories. She wanted to ask him what haunted him, but every time she tried, she saw the walls he had built around himself. Talon was a man who could face enemies with a fearless expression, yet he seemed terrified of speaking about his own past. One morning, Clara found him repairing the broken fence near the edge of her land. "You don't have to keep helping me," she said. Talon looked up. "You helped me when I could not help myself." His simple answer surprised her. Most people expected repayment. They helped because they wanted something in return. But Talon acted as if kindness was a debt that had to be honored. "You saved my life," Clara replied. He shook his head. "No." His voice was quiet. "You saved mine." The words stayed with her long after he walked away. Clara began noticing the small details others ignored. The way Talon never wasted food, the way he treated animals with respect, the way he listened more than he spoke. The settlement had painted him as a dangerous warrior, but the man standing beside her cabin was different from the stories. He carried sadness, not cruelty. One afternoon, while preparing supplies, Clara found an old scar on Talon's shoulder. It was not from a recent battle. It was much older. "You have many scars," she said softly. Talon immediately pulled his shirt back into place. "Some wounds heal." "And some don't?" Clara asked. He looked toward the distant mountains. "Some stay because they remind us who we were." That answer stayed in Clara's mind. She began to understand that Talon was not running from enemies. He was running from himself. Days turned into weeks, and the distance between them slowly disappeared. Talon taught Clara how to track footprints, recognize changes in the weather, and survive the harsh desert. Clara laughed when she failed, and for the first time in a long time, Talon smiled. A real smile. Not the cold expression he showed the world. The moment was brief, but Clara saw something hidden beneath his warrior's appearance. A man who wanted peace. A man who wanted to be understood. But their growing friendship did not go unnoticed. People from the settlement began talking. They saw Talon coming and going from Clara's property. They saw the way she defended him when others spoke badly about him. And rumors spread. "She's been fooled. He's dangerous. She doesn't understand what kind of man she invited into her home." One evening, Clara's neighbor, Mrs. Parker, came to warn her. You need to send him away, the older woman said. Clara looked at her calmly. Why? Because he is not like us. Clara frowned. What does that mean? Parker lowered her voice. It means he carries things you don't understand. Clara looked toward the desert, where Talon had disappeared earlier that day. Maybe that was true. Maybe she did not understand everything, but she understood one thing. The man everyone feared had shown her more kindness than many people who claim to be civilized. That night, when Talon returned, Clara finally asked the question that had been sitting in her heart. Why do you hide who you are? He stopped. The fire between them cracked softly. For a long moment, Talon said nothing. Then he answered. Because when people know the truth, they leave. Clara felt her heart tighten. What truth? Talon looked at her, and for the first time, she saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of enemies, fear of being rejected. My past is not a story people forgive. The words hung between them. Clara wanted to tell him that everyone deserved a chance, but she knew there was something deeper, something painful, something he had carried alone for years. Later that night, while Talon slept, Clara found the small wooden charm he carried with him. She had seen it many times before, but now she noticed something carved into it. A name, a symbol, a memory. It was clear that Talon had lost someone important, someone who had changed him forever. The next morning, Talon prepared to leave. Clara was shocked. You're leaving? He avoided her eyes. I brought danger to your door. You protected me. I cannot protect you from what follows me. Before Clara could answer, he mounted his horse and rode toward the desert. But after watching him disappear into the distance, Clara realized something. She was no longer afraid of the mysterious Apache warrior. She was afraid of losing him. And somewhere beyond the mountains, Talon carried a secret that would soon bring the entire past back to him. A secret that would test whether Clara's trust was strong enough to survive the truth. The desert looked different after Talon left. At least, that was what Clara Whitmore told herself. The same mountains stood in the distance. The same winds moved across the valley. The same golden sun rose every morning. But something was missing. For weeks, Clara had become used to seeing Talon near her cabin. She had grown accustomed to his quiet footsteps, his calm presence, and the way he always seemed to know when something before she even spoke. Now the silence felt heavier than before. She tried convincing herself that it was better this way. Talon was dangerous. That was what everyone said. He belonged to a world she knew nothing about. Yet every time she remembered him leaving, she remembered something else. The sadness in his eyes. The way he believed he was protecting her by walking away. And Clara realized something that frightened her. She missed him. 3 days passed before the sound of a horse finally reached her cabin. Clara rushed outside. Talon was returning. But he was not alone. His expression was serious, and his clothes were covered with dust from a long journey. He looked exhausted, but the moment he saw Clara standing there, something softened in his face. I thought you would be gone, she said quietly. Talon looked away. I tried. Those 2 words told her everything. He had tried to leave. He had tried to convince himself that distance was safer. But he had returned. Over the next few days, Clara noticed a change in him. He was still guarded, but the walls around him were not as strong as before. He began telling her small pieces of his past. Not the whole truth, not yet, but enough for her to understand that Talon had lived through things no person should have to endure. He told her about losing his family when he was young. He told her about battles he wished he could forget. He told her about the burden of being seen as a warrior when all he wanted was a peaceful life. But whenever the conversation reached a certain point, he stopped. There was one memory he refused to share, one secret he protected more fiercely than his own life. One evening, as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, Clara asked him again, Why do you believe you don't deserve happiness? Talon remained silent. Finally he answered, because happiness was taken from me once. Clara looked at him. And you think you can never have it again? His eyes met hers. No, his voice was barely a whisper. I think if I let myself have it, I will lose it. Clara understood then. Talon was not afraid of love. He was afraid of losing it. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing day. Clara began seeing the man behind the legend. She saw how carefully he treated every living thing. She saw how he carried guilt that was never truly his. She saw how he protected everyone except himself. One afternoon, while they were gathering herbs near a river, Clara slipped on the rocks. Before she could fall, Talon caught her. For a moment they stood frozen. The world around them disappeared. Clara felt the strength in his hands, but more than that, she felt the hesitation. Stepped back. I'm sorry. She looked confused. Why? Because I forget sometimes. Forget what? That I am not allowed to want something good. Those words broke something inside Clara. Because she realized Talon had spent his entire life believing he was unworthy of being loved. And she knew she could not let him believe that forever. But their peaceful days could not last. The settlement's fear grew stronger. A group of men arrived near Clara's property, led by a wealthy ranch owner named William Carter. He had always wanted Clara's land, and now he saw an opportunity. He used Talon as an excuse. He is dangerous, Carter told the townspeople. He is hiding something. The people believed him. Fear was easier than understanding. Soon, threats began arriving. Warnings. Messages telling Clara to send Talon away. But instead of pushing him away, Clara made a choice. She stood beside him. When Talon discovered what she had done, he was angry. You should have stayed out of this. Clara stared at him. No. His expression changed. You don't understand. No, she replied. I understand perfectly. The wind moved around them. You protected me when everyone told me to fear you. Now I'm protecting you when everyone tells me to hate you. For the first time, Talon had no answer, because no one had ever stood beside him before. No one had ever looked at him and seen a person instead of a threat. But that night, Talon finally revealed a small piece of the secret he had been hiding. A secret connected to his past. A secret that could destroy the fragile trust they had built. And when Clara learned the truth, she would have to decide whether the man she cared for was still the same man she believed in. The night, Talon finally decided to tell Clara the truth. The desert felt unusually quiet. The wind that normally moved through the valley had disappeared. The stars above them shone brightly, almost as if the entire world was waiting for the secret that had been hidden for so many years. Clara sat beside the fire outside the cabin, while Talon stood a few steps away, staring into the darkness. She could see the struggle on his face. The same warrior who had faced danger without fear was now fighting a battle inside himself. Talon, Clara said softly, you don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to share. He looked back at her. That is the problem. His voice was heavy. I have spent my whole life believing that if people knew the truth, they would see me differently. Clara watched him carefully. Maybe they would. Talon lowered his eyes. That is what I fear. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he sat beside the fire. When people tell stories about me, they call me a warrior. They call me dangerous. They say I have no heart. He paused, but they do not know why. Clara waited. Years of pain were hidden behind his silence. Talon took a slow breath. When I was younger, I believed strength meant never showing weakness. I thought a warrior had to carry every burden alone. The fire reflected in his eyes. Then I learned the hardest lesson. What lesson? Clara asked. That a person can survive a battle and still lose everything. He told her about the tragedy that changed his life. Years earlier, Talon had been responsible for protecting his people during a dangerous conflict. He had been young, proud, and certain that he could control every situation. But he failed. A mistake he made led to a loss that haunted him. Someone he loved was taken from him. And from that day forward, Talon believed he was cursed. He left behind the life he knew. He stopped allowing anyone close. He became the man everyone feared because being feared felt easier than being hurt again. Clara listened without interrupting. When he finished, he expected anger, judgment, disappointment. Instead, she asked quietly, "Do you really think one mistake means you don't deserve peace?" Talon looked at her. "You don't understand. I understand more than you think." Clara looked toward the empty desert. "I lost my family too. I know what it feels like to wake up every day carrying something you cannot change." Talon studied her. "But you kept going," he said. "So did you." Those words affected him more than she realized. For years, Talon had seen himself only through the eyes of those who blamed him. But Clara saw something different. She saw a man who had suffered, a man who had been protect others, a man who had been punishing himself for a lifetime. The next morning, everything between them felt different. The secret that Talon had feared would destroy their bond had done the opposite. It brought them closer. But the world outside their small cabin was not ready to accept what had happened. The rumors grew worse. People in the settlement claimed Clara had been manipulated. They refused to believe that an Apache warrior and a woman from their community could understand each other. William Carter used the situation to gain support. He gathered men who wanted Talon gone. "He is dangerous," Carter said. "He will never belong here." But Clara finally understood something. Belonging was not something others gave you. It was something you created with the people who truly saw you. One evening, Talon prepared to leave again. Clara found him packing his belongings. Her heart sank. "Where are you going?" Talon did not turn around. "Away from here. Because of them? Because of me." Clara stepped closer. "You still believe you are a danger to everyone around you." Talon remained silent. She looked at the man who had saved her life, protected her home, and shown her kindness when the entire world told her to be afraid. "You keep trying to disappear because you think that is what a good man does." His eyes finally met hers. "But you're wrong. The desert was silent. You don't need to run from your past forever." For the first time, Talon allowed himself to believe those words. But before he could answer, a distant sound interrupted them. Horses. Many horses. The men from the settlement had arrived, and this time they were not coming to warn them. They were coming to take Talon away. The secret that had once separated Clara and Talon had finally brought them together. Now they would have to fight for the future they had found. The sound of approaching horses grew louder with every passing second. Clara stood beside Talon, watching the shadows move across the desert. The peaceful life they had built together, the quiet mornings, the shared conversations, the moments when they began to understand each other, was suddenly threatened. Talon knew exactly who was coming. The men from the settlement, the same people who had judged him without knowing him, the same people who had decided his fate before ever hearing his story. "You need to go," Clara whispered. Talon looked at her in surprise. "You want me to leave?" "No." Her voice became stronger. "I want you to live." Talon studied her face. For years he had survived by running. Whenever danger came, he disappeared. Whenever people rejected him, he accepted it as something he deserved. But Clara was different. She did not see a feared Apache warrior. She saw Talon, the man who had quietly repaired her fence, the man who stayed awake at night to make sure she was safe, the man who carried pain no one else understood. "I cannot let them hurt you because of me," Talon said. Clara shook her head. "You still don't understand." She stepped closer. "You spent your whole life protecting everyone else. Maybe now it is time someone protects you. Those words reached deeper than any weapon ever could. Before Talon could respond, the riders stopped outside the property. William Carter stepped forward, a wealthy rancher with a cold smile and a desire for control. "Step away from him." She looked at him. "Why?" Carter frowned. "Because that man is dangerous." Clara looked at Talon, then back at Carter. "No." The answer surprised everyone. "He is the only person here who showed me kindness when I had nothing." The men behind Carter exchanged uncertain looks. They had expected fear. They had expected Clara to obey. They did not expect her to stand beside the man they hated. Carter's expression hardened. "You don't know what he has done." Clara answered calmly, "Neither do you." The words silenced him, because that was the truth. They knew stories, they knew rumors, but they did not know the man. Carter pointed toward Talon. "He does not belong here." Talon finally stepped forward. For a moment, Clara thought he would fight, but he did not. Instead, he spoke with a calmness that surprised everyone. "I know what I am." He looked at the men. "I know the mistakes I have made." His eyes moved toward the mountains. "I have carried them every day." Then he looked back. "But I will not spend the rest of my life being punished by people who never knew my heart." The crowd became silent. It was the first time Talon had spoken for himself, not as a warrior, not as a legend, as a man. Carter refused to accept it. He ordered the men to move forward, but before they could, something unexpected happened. One of the older men from the settlement stepped forward. He had known Clara's family for years. "I have watched this man," he said. Everyone turned. He had many chances to harm her. He looked at Talon, but he never did. The crowd began to question themselves. Maybe they had been wrong. Maybe fear had blinded them. But Carter was not finished. He had not come only because of Talon. He wanted Clara's land, and now he realized his plan was falling apart. The confrontation ended without the violence everyone expected, but the damage was done. Talon knew he could never return to the life he once had, and Clara knew she could never return to the person she once was. That night, as they sat near the fire, Talon was quiet. "You should hate me," he finally said. Clara looked confused. "Why would I?" "Because my past brought danger to your door." She shook her head. "No," she reached for his hand. "Your past brought you to my door." Talon looked at her. For the first time he allowed himself to believe that maybe he was not cursed. Maybe he was not destined to be alone. Maybe the life he thought was over was only beginning. But the desert still held one final challenge. A message arrived from Talon's old tribe. They needed him. A conflict was coming, and only Talon could help prevent it. He had spent years running from who he was. Now he had to face it. And this time, Clara would not be waiting behind him. She would stand beside him. Because the warrior who once believed he had lost everything had finally found the one thing worth fighting for. The desert had always been a place of survival. It tested every person who crossed its harsh lands. It took away the weak, challenged the strong, and revealed the truth hidden inside people's hearts. For years, Talon believed the desert had taken everything from him. His family, his peace, his hope. He thought his only purpose was to carry the weight of his past and protect others from the darkness he believed lived inside him. But Clara Whitmore changed that. She showed him something he had forgotten, that a person was not defined by the worst moment of their life. They were defined by what they chose to do afterward. After the confrontation with William Carter and the settlers, Talon received a message from his people. Trouble was growing near the mountains. Old enemies were creating fear among the tribes, and Talon was needed. The news brought back memories he had spent years trying to bury. The warrior inside him returned. The man who fought battles. The man who carried responsibility. The man who believed he could never have a normal life. Clara noticed the change immediately. "You're thinking about leaving," she said one evening. Talon looked toward the horizon. I have to go. She was quiet for a moment. Years ago, those words would have meant goodbye. But Clara was no longer the same woman who watched him ride away helplessly. She stepped closer. Then I'm coming with you. Talon turned quickly. No. The answer came immediately. It is dangerous. Clara smiled slightly. You used to tell me I didn't understand your world. She looked into his eyes. But you were wrong. The fire between them flickered. I understand that you have spent your whole life protecting everyone because you think you don't deserve to be protected. Talon had no response. Because she was right. For the first time, he was not fighting enemies. He was fighting the belief that he had to be alone. Together, they traveled toward the mountains. Along the way, Clara saw another side of Talon. Not the feared warrior from the stories, the leader, the teacher, the man his people respected. Children who once hid from him ran toward him. Elders greeted him with pride. Clara realized something important. The world had only seen one version of Talon, a version created by fear, but those who truly knew him saw the truth. He was not a monster. He was a man who had survived. When they arrived, Talon faced the conflict waiting for him. Old disagreements threatened to create another battle, but instead of choosing anger, he chose wisdom. The same man who once believed violence was the only answer now understood something different. Strength was not only shown through fighting. Sometimes the strongest person was the one who chose peace. With Clara beside him, Talon helped bring understanding between people who had spent too long separated by hatred and fear. After everything was settled, Talon finally returned to the place where his journey had begun. The small cabin in the desert. The place where a lonely woman had saved a wounded stranger. The place where two people from completely different worlds discovered they were not as different as everyone believed. Years later, people still told stories about them. They spoke about the Apache warrior who was feared across the frontier. But they also spoke about the woman who saw past the rumors. The woman who looked at a broken man and believed he could be whole again. Clara never changed Talon into someone else. She did something far greater. She reminded him who he had always been. A man worthy of love. A man who did not need to hide behind his scars anymore. And Talon gave Clara something in return. He showed her that courage was not the absence of fear. It was choosing love, even when the entire world told you to be afraid. The secret that once haunted him was no longer a chain holding him back. It became the reason he finally opened his heart. And the young woman who once feared the unknown became the only person who could reach the warrior hidden beneath the legend. Because sometimes the greatest battles are not fought with weapons. They are fought inside the heart. And sometimes the person who saves you is not the one who defeats your enemies. It is the one who makes you believe you were worth saving all along.